Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is Ursula Mason. I'm chair of RCGP Northern Ireland Council, and I'm delighted to be chairing this session today. You are all very welcome to our session on food for thought. How can we eat more sustainably? And I suspect as we all sit down after our wonderful lunch, which I hope you all enjoyed, and I know our speaker will probably talk a little bit about it, but we're all suitably fed in a sustainable way as we sit and contemplate the consideration that we know that there is a significant problem across food industry when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, and we know that this is an area that needs to be considered as we move forward and considering, I suppose, sustainable futures, sustainable living. And this session's about what we as healthcare professionals can do, what's the impact of what we do in terms of our day-to-day lives, but also personally and professionally around what we talk to our patients about and how we live our lives from a sustainable food perspective. So I am delighted to introduce our speaker. I will not tell you a huge amount about her because she's going to do that herself, but I would just like you to welcome Dr. Ishani Rao. Please do ask some questions. We'll have a little bit of time at the end, I hope, to ask some questions or even put some comments in the chat. And hopefully we can all enjoy the session. So over to you, Ishani.
Thank you so much. So I'm really, really excited to be talking to you today about something I love, which is food. Who doesn't love food? I absolutely love eating. I absolutely love sharing food with people. I think food can be something that is so incredibly powerful and empowering. So I'm going to be chatting to you about how we can make more sustainable choices with regards to what we eat. So a little bit about me. So my name is Dr. Ishani Rao, and I'm an NHS GP, and I also cover the London ambulance across Guy's, King's and St Thomas's. I have a background in women's health. I'm currently taking my master's in global health policy with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. I take talks for the BBC, Spanish Parliament and the UK Parliament about sustainable foods and about how we can transition to a sustainable food system. My passion when I'm not on land is conservation scuba diving. So when you won't find me in general practice or advocating for policy changes, I'm underwater building artificial coral reefs. I'm a keen member of plant-based health professionals and eco-medics, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about those amazing organizations now. Ecomedics was founded by my lovely friend and colleague, Dr. Nathan Hudson Peacock, who's an A&E registrar at St Thomas's. And he initially started looking at how we can make sustainable changes in hospitals because the NHS actually produces 5% of the UK's carbon emissions. So this is absolutely massive, and we can do so much as healthcare professionals to try and address this, both on an individual level, but also within our workplaces and within our organizations. Now, they host a podcast, which I'd recommend checking out, annual conferences as well. And I've just started hosting eco-anxiety workshops for healthcare professionals concerned about climate change. And we just had a sold-out retreat as well in the Woodlands, which was absolutely amazing. So definitely check out Ecomedics, get involved as well. Plant-based health professionals, founded by my wonderful friend, Dr. Shireen Kassam, who's a consultant hematologist at King's College London. So I know we have a few members of plant-based health professionals in the audience here today. So absolutely lovely to see some familiar faces. Plant-based health professionals have some amazing resources that look at the benefits of a plant-based diet on different healthcare conditions. So they're an absolutely amazing organization. And if you have a family member, or you yourself, or you have patients that you think might benefit towards transitioning to a whole food plant-based diet, then definitely check out their resources. So I imagine that we are all here today at this talk because we have an interest in sustainability. and we want to look after the environment, and we all enjoy being out in nature, and climate change is something that is important to us. I also can assume that as healthcare professionals, as general practitioners, and as people that advocate for unwell patients, we are compassionate individuals that want to use our skills and our knowledge and our resources to advocate for the patient in front of us. However, this is now changing in terms of what this really means, because with increasing globalization and international connectivity and social media, we know that our actions do not just impact the patient in front of us. We have the ability to impact 8 billion people with our actions and with what we do. So this is kind of changing with regards to what this means to be a healthcare practitioner. And we need to take a step back to assess how our actions affect the global health and the general population rather than just one patient in front of us. So why is food so important to me? One, because it's delicious, and all of the pictures taken in this presentation are from my phone reel, so I have enjoyed all of these delicious meals. Food is so very important. I grew up in Spain, and I'm from India, where we have an incredible social connection with food. It's very mindful. Everybody slows down to enjoy food together. And I realized that I was losing that when I started working in the NHS. And when I came to the UK, often I would just snatch a meal in front of my computer screen while doing discharge summaries. And I thought, actually, I'm eating very mindlessly, and I'm losing that connection with what I'm eating. I then started working at Bethlehem Hospital in one of the highest secure eating disorders units in the world, where I realized that not only we have a problem with binge eating, we also have a problem with undereating and anorexia nervosa, which has the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric disorder. I then went to Sri Lanka on my medical elective, and I looked around and I thought, so many different fields are being grown to grow crops, and we've got an overabundance of food in the markets, and there's so much fresh produce, yet I'm still seeing patients in the hospitals who are dying and starving as a consequence of undernutrition and a lack of calories. And then I came back to the UK, where I see that I'm working in hospitals and in general practices where we have 1/3 of people who are 40% of people who are overweight, and 1 in 4 people who are classified as obese. So why is there this huge global imbalance in calories and what we're eating? Why are some people not having this access to food and some people are having this overabundance of food in the Western world? And then I realized when I was looking into sustainable travel and how beautiful the UK is, and I was, going on road trips around the UK rather than flying, I realized that actually 70% of the UK is being used for farmland. And this is an incredible waste of biodiversity and a loss of biodiversity because of monoculture. So then I realized actually we're losing a lot of our natural world because of current farming practices. And here's a slide that talks about food waste. So let's start with something basic. How much food is wasted in the UK? Does anybody have any idea, without looking at my beautiful infograph, any shout outs about how much in terms of percentage, what proportion is food is wasted in the UK? It's 1/3 of food, and the majority of that comes from households. Okay, the majority of that is not from supermarkets or from hospitals, it's actually from our own households. And if we reduced that food waste, if we accounted for that food waste and eliminated that food waste, it would be the equivalent in terms of carbon savings as taking 1 in 4 cars off the road. So actually we need to be doing what we can on an individual level to address food waste. And there's some really fun and delicious ways of doing that. So every few months, I make a huge jar of kimchi with all of my vegetable scraps, and that's my jar of kimchi, which I eat. It's really good for your gut. It's really good for your gut-brain axis, the fermented food. But it's a really easy way of just throwing all of your vegetables in a huge jar and kind of allowing that to be preserved. We have historical ways of preserving food, such as fermenting, pickling, drying. All of these things were invented before the invention of the freezer, so that we could actually look after our food and take it and let it take months to actually be preserved so that we can consume it without wasting it. Something that's been really, really basic and simple for me is organizing my fridge and my freezer into glass containers so that I know exactly what is in there. Because I know that I was really guilty of not even knowing what was in the back of my fridge or what was in the back of my freezer. And then maybe sometimes it would go off. So actually just sorting out your fridge and your freezer. So maybe you're labeling it, maybe you're sorting it out from the front to the back, maybe it's going into different sections. That can be a really great way of reducing food waste. And on a hospital scale, actually digitizing so that patients can choose what they want to eat, that might seem really basic. But how many times have we seen in hospitals that patients are being bought meals that maybe they can't eat because they're nil by mouth, maybe they don't like the meal, maybe because of religious or dietary requirements, they can't have that meal. So a huge amount of food is being wasted in hospitals, also because often meals are allocated to bed numbers, to bed numbers rather than patients. And how often do we know that a patient has gone walkabouts and maybe for a scan, or maybe they've changed ward or changed rooms, and then that meal is wasted? And then actually looking at what we do with food waste in hospitals is a huge thing as well. So I've just bought a rotating compost bin to use at home, and I put my food waste in it, and I've got an amazing source of nutrient-rich compost at home. And actually hospitals are always also looking into doing that on a bigger scale, which is amazing. So this graph is really interesting. So it's a play on the term eat reasonably, but it's looking at what we can do in terms of seasonal food choices. So we know that we used to be able to go to our fruit and veg market and buy whatever was in season. And now, again, with increasing transport links and globalization, that's quite difficult. We know that we can always get passion fruit, we can always get pineapple, but it would be worth actually just looking at a graph and seeing which fruit and vegetables are grown in season, because then that kind of eliminates the extra energy and the artificial requirements with regards to temperature, water, pH changes, light conditions, all of those artificial elements that would be need to control food that's grown out of season. We can actually mitigate that a bit by just looking to see if we can buy fruit and vegetables and products that are in season. And buying local. Has anybody seen this photo, which is pears grown in the UK? I found it on Reddit. Pears grown in the UK or sold in the UK, that are grown in Argentina and packaged in Thailand and then sold in the UK. So actually, this is probably one pear that is being transported all across the world, and preservatives are being used to just allow us to eat this one pear. So it's super, super inefficient. So have a think about where your ingredients and where your packaging and where all of these different steps of the food chain are actually coming from. I remember about 7-8 years ago when I went to a global health conference, and it was really what sparked my interest. They made us sit down and look up where all of the different ingredients in a Kit Kat were produced. And this is a campaign by Greenpeace that kind of attacks Nestle, and it plays on their Kit Kat slogan, and it says, "Give us a break," and looks at orangutans. Because Kit Kats actually have palm oil, which is grown in Indonesia. They have cocoa butter, which is grown in the West Indies. They've got milk from somewhere else, sugar from somewhere else. And what's the price of a Kit Kat? Probably, I don't know, 70, 80p. So how are we using all of these different steps in the food chain that are being distributed all around the world with transport and energy requirements, and yet we're still putting the price on these Kit Kats at something so low, which means that the farmers actually aren't getting what they deserve in terms of the energy requirements and growth of the ingredients. So have a think. I used to think, oh, that's cheap, that's great. But actually now I've kind of changed my perception of what it means to have cheap food and maybe where that comes from. I love this graph. So it's from Our World in Data. Does anybody know Our World in Data? Have a look. The graphs are absolutely amazing. And I love this graph because it looks at ingredients and different steps of the food chain. So here we've got land use, farming, animal feed, processing, transport, retail, and packaging. Okay, so there's a huge kind of buzzword about local and sustainable, but actually local and sustainable only accounts for that tiny small amount over there. I can barely even see it, anything past the green and the farm and the animal feed. Actually, what's contributing hugely to emissions is the land use, the farming, the animal feed, and then the processing. And then if we look at the ingredients, actually, we've got here at the top, we've got predominantly animal products. And here at the bottom, we've got predominantly fruit and vegetables. So at the top, we've got beef, lamb, cheese, dairy beef, chocolate, coffee, prawns, palm oil, pig meat, poultry meat, olive oil, fish, eggs, rice, fish, milk. And then from the bottom, we've got nuts, citrus, apples, root veg, bananas, peas, soya milk, cassava. So look at that proportion of emissions for ingredients compared to the ingredients at the top. So actually, local and sustainable is really important, and that's, you know, doing our bit to support local and sustainable businesses. But actually, what's even more important is the ingredients that we are consuming. So we need to be looking at data from Huge organizations such as the UN, the International Panel for Climate Change, Oxford University, The Lancet, the World Economic Forum, and even Scientific American that say that we need to be transitioning to a plant-based food system in order to reduce our burden on the environment as a consequence of what we eat. And here's some fun facts. So, soya gets a bad rep, right? Everybody says soya is deforesting the Amazon. And that is true. Huge amounts of the Amazon are being deforested so that we can grow soya. However, 80% of the world's soya is used where? To feed to livestock, right? So this is 80% of the world's soy. It's not because I'm eating tofu for lunch. It's because we're using it to feed to cows and to cattle and to sheep. We also have these statistics that animal agriculture industry generates more carbon emissions than the entirety of the transport sector, including aviation. And also, has anybody heard the statistic about how many bathtubs of water are required to generate one beef burger? I've looked at the stats extensively because lots of people like to argue with me when I do my vegan talks. And it seems to be between 30 to 60 bathtubs of water, okay, to generate one beef burger. And I love showing this slide to a crowd of really, really smart people because I just love to say the words, dairy is scary. I love it. So again, almonds and almond milk get a really bad reputation, like soya and like avocados, because almonds do use a lot of water compared to other alternative milks. However, from this article in the journal Science, which was published in 2018, we can see that the land impact, the carbon emissions and the water use of almonds is still so much significantly less than dairy milk. And at the bottom, I've just got, for everybody that says, oh, I just can't find a milk that tastes good in my tea compared to dairy milk. I'm not going to call it normal milk. But I say, well, why don't you try oat milk, hemp milk, rice, almond, pea, soya, hazelnut, peanut, cashew, coconut, pistachio, flaxseed, and then come back to me. Because you will find something. And when you realize the psychological implications of the dairy industry, plus the environmental implications, you want to find an alternative milk a whole lot faster. Something that's so important to me as a conservation scuba diver and a dive master, bringing out groups of conservationists and being the dive medic for these conservation organizations, is the fishing industry. Okay, straws. You know, we demonize plastic straws, and so we should, but actually people are demonizing plastic straws and still eating fish and still supporting bottom trawling. And when I'm scuba diving, and I've been scuba diving for 20 years, I can see the damage that bottom trawling and large-scale fishing does to the coral reefs, what it does to the bottom of our oceans. Large-scale fishing does not discriminate between fish that we deem edible and dolphins and turtles and baby whales and other animals that we want to see. And there are huge parts of biodiversity in our oceans. Did anybody know that one blue whale harbors 4 times the carbon as the equivalent biomass of a rainforest? That's absolutely incredible. We need to be protecting these beautiful beings. For me, the sea is so important for my physical and my mental health and my social life. And I've seen that destruction, that slow destruction over the years as a consequence of bottom trawling. There's less fish. We deplete the oceans more. We have these huge nets which go over coral reefs. The coral reefs actually protect coastal communities from floods and from tsunamis. And we're actually destroying those to look for more fish. So that's something that's really important to me. And we need healthy oceans to be able to sustain coastal communities and to be able to sustain our food system. Does anybody know that the WHO classifies processed meats as a class 1 carcinogen in the same field as tobacco and asbestos? And we are still serving class 1 carcinogens to our children in schools and to our patients in hospitals and in nursing homes. That doesn't really sit right with me. So let's look at the science behind it. This is a huge study, and I love this study because it's over 60 years of Seventh-day Adventists, and it studies 150,000 Seventh-day Adventists over a 60-year life period. And they're really, really cool to study because they're very, very healthy. They live in these pockets like the blue zones in the United States, like Loma Linda. They're really, really cool to study because you can stratify them into vegans and non-vegans very easily, and lots of their other lifestyle things are the same. Even when stratified for their lifestyle variables, we've seen a 7 7-year increase in life expectancy in males who do not consume any meat compared to those that do. We've seen a 60% reduction in type 2 diabetes and also a lower risk of high blood pressures, cancers, high BMI. If we think about what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis in general practice and in hospitals, these are lifestyle conditions. How much time would we have if we reduced the burden of lifestyle conditions such as high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, chronic pain, inflammatory conditions, and cancers? We would have so much more time to spend on the things that are unpreventable. And to me, I think that that's why are we trying to battle these conditions at the end stages of life and throwing people medications when we could be looking at prevention, and we all know prevention is the best cure. Another huge study, which was published last year, of 3 million people that looks at the relationship between plant-based diets and all-cause digestive system cancers. And this study of 3 million people found that there was a 30% reduction in all-cause GI cancers. And we know the relationship between colorectal cancer and red meat. We know the relationship between dairy and prostate cancer and breast cancer. However, looking at all-cause GI cancers and 30%, that would take a lot of pressure off oncology services. And does anybody know about the gut-brain axis? Gut-brain axis? Okay, so this is really exciting, and I'm fascinated by this field. And this was published in the Journal of Translational Psychiatry, and it's about the effects of a whole food plant-based diet on mental health. And this is really cool because it was the first paper that I could find in a proper psychiatric journal that looks at that direct and indirect relationship between good nutrients and what we're putting into our bodies and actually how we're feeling. And we all know that when we're not feeling well, maybe we want to reach for cake, and maybe we want to reach for sugary and processed foods, but actually that makes us feel worse, right? And we all know that on psychiatric wards, people have a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. And this is a horrible, vicious cycle where we can't get on top of diabetes, of obesity, of cardiovascular disease in psychiatric patients. So actually, it's silly to think that what we're putting into our gut is not affecting how we're feeling, because 80% of our serotonin is produced in our gut. And we know that 1 in 4 people has a diagnosed mental health problem. So if we start to make people feel better by what they're eating and actually just stimulate that direct link between the brain and the gut, then again, we'd be decreasing the burden of psychiatric illness that we see in general practice and in hospitals. This is an amazing interview with my good friend and colleague, Dr. Shireen Kassam in the Metro, who looks at the implications of the cost saving on the NHS if we transition to a plant-based food system. And she estimates that this is a cost saving on the NHS of billions every year. And this is also supported in huge studies that look at vegans over the age of 60, and it shows that they have half as many medications prescribed. And I can completely understand that when you look at what we're prescribing to patients in general practice: statins, aspirin, antihypertensive, antiplatelets, all of these things, which, are to do with lifestyle inherently. So this cost saving and reduction in polypharmacy would be massive if we all started eating a whole lot healthier. Here's an article that I wrote for Vegan Food and Living magazine. So I'm an author for Vegan Food and Living magazine, just because I said this morning, I can't afford therapy, so I like to write. So here's an article that I wrote for Vegan Food and Living magazine, and it looks at the burden and implications of pandemics. So I don't know what the science is behind COVID. I'm not sure if any of us will know, but we know that SARS, MERS, Ebola, H1N1, H5N1, swine flu, all of these badger flus and all of these weird and preventable things are caused by our treatment of animals. We are putting animals in close proximity to each other, where often they die, they start eating each other, they are transmitting viruses, bacteria, we're using antibiotics and throwing antibiotics at them. At one point, 2 or 3 years ago, 47% of the UK's antibiotics were used on livestock. And we're trying to battle antibiotic resistance in hospital, yet feeding it in vats, literally pouring antibiotics in vats in farms. That doesn't make sense to me. So actually, I didn't enjoy COVID, and I'd really like to prevent a future pandemic. So maybe we should be looking at our treatment of animals rather than culling them. And we are here because we are compassionate individuals. We care about people, we care about the planet, we care about our patients. And I want to believe that we care about the animals. I want to believe that we do not want to pay for baby male chicks to be thrown into blenders alive, as is legal in the UK, just because we want to eat eggs and they are deemed to be unusable. I do not want to believe that we want to keep paying for female cows to be raped and sexually assaulted again and again and again, just so that they can be kept pregnant, so that we have milk. There are other ways of living. And if we do not care about the animals and we say that's what they are here for, then maybe with all of this science, we understand that actually, if we change our behavioral patterns towards eating, we can protect the planet and individuals too. So what does the NHS care about? What do practices care about? Essentially, it is a business, so we care about cost. So we've got data from 150 countries from the International Comparison Programme for Food, which looks at low to middle to high income countries across 150 of them. And it shows that on average, a vegan diet is 1/3 cheaper than that includes animal products. And I can completely vouch for that, right? I know that I spend so little money on food and I am eating all the time because it's really, really cheap to buy lentils and grains and vegetables and tofu. And yes, occasionally I might buy the vegan Ben & Jerry's or the vegan Cathedral City, but those are actually the same price as the non-vegan ones anyway. And then if we look at the price of meat, which might be cheaper, we're thinking, why is this meat so cheap? I don't think that's something to be proud of either. Is it possible? This is what we want to know, right? Is this possible? So we've got multiple universities, including the University of Edinburgh, we've got Queen Mary's, we've got Birmingham, we've got Cambridge, that have all said that they want to transition to a plant-based food system and have all pledged to transition to a plant-based food system. We've got 22 cities, including Lambeth, Oxfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Warwick, which have said, yes, we also want to sign the plant-based councils and the plant-based treaty. We've got 11 New York public hospitals under the Mayor Eric Adams, which have said a couple of years ago that they don't want to serve any animal products and they've gone completely vegan. Why have the New York public hospitals gone vegan and yet the private hospitals are still serving meat? Because you can make money off sick people. So I don't know why the NHS doesn't take a stand and move towards what other hospitals are doing. There's also a large hospital, which is a private hospital in Lebanon, which has transitioned to completely vegan. And they're doing really, really well. We've got meat and dairy farms and huge meat industries, which are turning around, especially in the States, and saying our land is burning. You know, we need to be taking a stand towards a more sustainable, a more compassionate, and a more plausible future. So yes, large organizations are doing this. I remember when I was doing talks for my sustainability leads 5 years ago, and they said, well, it's impossible to control what people eat. And I thought, well, why don't we serve them cigarettes and alcohol as well then? But I didn't say that. But, you know, I did think, okay, we don't have anybody that's already doing this. This was a few years ago. And now we do. We do have evidence that this is working and that it's working well. And then we have wonderful organizations like the Royal College of GPs that have decided to take a forward stand in having a healthy meal prepared for people. I used to have to run away and buy a meal like the one that we had today in conferences because there just weren't any healthy options and there weren't any sustainable options. And now I didn't have to do that today. And I feel so honored that we are taking a stand and we are saying that a sustainable lifestyle with regards to our food choices is possible. Did everyone enjoy lunch today? Did everyone enjoy lunch? Amazing. Yeah, right. It was so colorful. It was so delicious. I probably could have had two, but hey, there's always room for improvement for next year. But I absolutely loved it. And I was really, really grateful to be part of an organization in healthcare that is not turning around and saying, well, we can't do that, sorry. When they're taking a positive and proactive stand, and that is what we need to be doing as healthcare professionals. We need to be setting good examples. We need to be showing people that it can be done, and we need to be advocating for sustainable change. And I've got an album on Facebook, which is called One Person Won't Make a Difference, said 8 billion people. And I just put in all of our little wins, you know, such as all of the plant-based universities, the first vegan schools across the world, Wimbledon serving vegan sponge cake, the New York hospitals, which are now vegan. The research terms for veganuary and on Deliveroo and Just Eat for vegan are just going up year by year by year. Before, a few years ago, we were 1% of the population, then we were 2% of the population, then we were 3% of the population. And this isn't just for, you know, people that want to be vegan for the environment. This is for people also that have religious beliefs, that have dietary requirements for health. This is something that we need to support. And under the Equality Act of 2010, They did say that veganism is a protected belief, and yet it is still so hard in some places to be able to find a decent meal. I want to make this the norm. I think that we should be transitioning to a food system which is accessible for everybody. And this is really exciting to be part of this movement. So something that I went through in my hospital in Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells was I was covering the COVID wards. I was supposed to be running a conservation clinic in 2020, but I started covering the COVID wards instead after being called back to A&E. And I realized there was no vegan meals available, and I was really hungry all the time. I was so hungry. I was knocking on the catering services door. I was knocking on the procurement services door. I was going to the nutrition team, the dietetics team, and I really escalated it. And it took time. It took time for me to get those answers and to arrange those meetings. And I just really want to encourage you that if you believe in something within your trust or within your workplace, and you think that it is for the greater good, and you think this is for your patients or for sustainability, change does not happen overnight. Keep pushing, keep arranging those meetings, keep providing them with the scientific evidence as to what you're doing. Because I did, and after a few years, I got free vegan meals for all of the staff in my hospitals. I got an incredible selection of vegan meals in my hospital canteen, which is still available today. And I opened a fruit and veg market outside the sweet shop, which was just super unhealthy. And I didn't know why we were serving it to patients in A&E, but now we have a fruit and veg market as well. And change didn't happen overnight, and it took time and effort, but I really encourage you that if you believe in something, then keep pushing for it within your workplace, because it just takes that one person to plant a seed. So where do we start on an individual level? I stopped eating meat when I was 9 or 10 because I thought, why have I got dogs running around? And yeah, I'm still eating these animals. So I started going vegetarian in the week and then eating meat on weekends. But I think you can probably do better because I was 9. So group initiatives are really important to me. So things like Meatless Mondays, Veganuary, get involved, get your family involved, get your workplace involved. Just start making these small, sustainable transitions. Something that's really important is the power of community, right? And we've got that through things like social media. We can see these amazing, huge groups of millions of people that are sharing their recipes, sharing their struggles, sharing what they could find difficult. So join the social media pages, because not only does it give you ideas, but actually it also provides you with really good motivation as well. Try the different ranges out there. So there's so many different ranges for alternative meats, and you might like one and you might not like another one, and that may take some time to find, but it's definitely worth persevering because there are some really good ones out there now. And then look at the variety of all of the different milks. I actually get my milk delivered to my front door through the Modern Milkman. So it's zero waste and it's absolutely delicious. So I get my oat milk delivered twice a week, which is really nice. And then something that resonates with the entire vegan community, and I do talks for vegans across the world and for huge vegan festivals and organizations and for vegan mental health. And I think something that we can all agree on is the only thing that I regret about going vegan is that I didn't do it sooner. It's so easy. I feel so good. I'm excited about eating. It's kind of brought that mindfulness back into eating as well, which I lost, I think. So definitely give it a go. Some resources, which I'm more than happy to send out, are plant-based health professionals and the American kind of physician committees for responsible medicine as well by Dr. Neil Bernard. Books such as How Not to Die by Dr. Michael Greger. He's brilliant. Check out his talks on YouTube. Gemma Newman as well. She's a UK GP. She's brilliant. Films are so brilliant. They really, really just solidify how I've been feeling. And once you've seen that footage, you never want to go back. Websites as well, such as Veganuary. Bosch have incredible, fun, easy, accessible, cheap recipes. So check them out. And the Happy Pear as well are really, really good for resources and for recipes. I love this quote. The one who plants trees knowing that he or she will never sit in their shade has at least started to understand the meaning of life. And I truly believe that. I might not see change overnight. I might not see it happen in my lifetime. You know, I could never have imagined that when I went vegetarian at the age of 10, I would now have my mom who is vegan, my dad who is vegan, my brother who is vegan, my brother's girlfriend who is vegan, all my flatmates are vegan, all my ex-boyfriends are vegan, and exes. But yeah, I wouldn't have imagined that sphere of influence that I could have had through just educating people and cooking for people and taking that time to be compassionate with people. So do not underestimate the power that one person can have. We might not see that change today. We might not see it this week, but it's so worth doing if you truly believe in something, because we know that we are making the world a better place. And here there's some delicious nachos, which I made recently for one of my vegan wellbeing days. Here is my LinkedIn. If anybody wants to send a message, if you need help, if you need motivation, if you need resources, then just drop me a message. I'm always happy to chat. And my Instagram, full of vegan propaganda, is Dr. Ishani Rao. So do reach out, and thank you so much for coming today.
Ishani, thank you so much. And I am so glad that we all had that delicious lunch before coming to this talk, because I think looking at some of those photographs would have made us very, very hungry. So thank you.